The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself, which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Epictetus, Discourses 2.5, 4-5.
Are you ready to make the most of the only life you have? To make smart money choices focused on achieving what you care about most? Here to help you balance living well today without sacrificing your tomorrow is the Retirement Answer Man, Roger Whitney.
Since 50 AD, which is the year that Epictetus was born in Turkey, this concept of not only clearly identifying what we can control and what we cannot control, but truly accepting those facts is really one of the biggest keys to being productive and happy and well-adjusted in life. It changes the perspectives of everything. When we accept the things that we can't control and we don't let them internally put us into turmoil, we can end up leading a lot better life because we're not running around chasing things and fretting about stuff that we don't have any control over anyway. And one of those big ones right now for you and I as we walk this journey towards retirement is the markets, which have been on a tear, crazy tear. Haven't seen markets like this since the 90s when we were in a tech boom in some aspects. And the worry that, man, this can't last forever. There has to be a correction at some point in time, which is true. There always is corrections. It's like seasons. We can't fret about it too much. The question is, what do we actually do about it in terms of things that we can actually control? We're going to start off this subject today, and then over the next few weeks until the end of the year, each week after today, we're going to have some action steps that you can take action on immediately to prepare for the possibility of a correction to hopefully help you ride it out as best you can and get towards the life that you want. So we're going to talk about a little bit about that in the Hot Topic segment today, and then we're going to get to some of your questions and comments about the webinar that we had last week, which biggest one ever. Hundreds and hundreds of people on the webinar. I was shocked. It was awesome. So thank you so much for your participation. Having you participate with your questions and your feedback helps us all learn. So that's awesome. So before we get to all these topics, we have to go to what? The disclaimer. So the one thing that I have absolutely no control over is what you do based on what you hear on the show or what you hear on other podcasts. All I can do, the only thing I can control is to help remind you each and every time that this is not advice and this needs to be helpful hints and education. And you need to make sure you do your own due diligence and talk to the people in your life that do know you, because that's just common sense. So whether it's a financial advisor, a legal advisor, tax advisor, make sure you talk to the people that know you before you make any decisions. So in the news today, about 3 or 4 days ago from the time of me reading this to you, Vanguard group came out, their research group came out and said there is now a 70% chance that we're going to have a U.S. stock market correction. I sort of think that's funny because I'm going to go out on a limb and say there is 100% chance that there will be a U.S. stock market correction. The question is, when? Many times with predictions about market corrections, it's not so much if they're going to happen that's the hard part to predict. It's really the timing of everything. If you search through Google, you can find headlines on famous financial sites like CNBC talking about market correction warnings going back almost every month to 2008, 2009, after the Great Recession happened. And so far, they've all been wrong. One of them will be right, and it's all going to be a matter of timing. Now, just the other day, we got an even more ominous warning from the head of Goldman Sachs on some comments he made in Germany. So I want to read you some of these because they are pretty ominous. So Lloyd Blankfein, the head of Goldman Sachs, was speaking in Germany, And he feels, quote unquote, unnerved by things going on in the stock market. And he had 8 reasons why he was so unnerved and thought that this may end badly. The first thing was basically it's been going on too long. We have had only very modest pullbacks, which he is totally accurate about. Especially over the last 5 years, we haven't really had a normal correction, which if memory serves me correctly is like every 18 months we have a 10% pullback. We have not seen that in a very long time. His second reason was if we track back to March of 2009, which was the bottom of the market, we have had a recovery market that's been going on for more than 8 years. That's more than 100 months, and I'm just reading from the TheStreet.com article. By comparison, the average economic expansion since 1945 has lasted about 58 months. So we're almost twice as long into this expansion, which can be worrisome. His third worry that he pointed out was coming into 2017, there was this wave of euphoria after President Trump was elected. Now, I don't know who was euphoric about it. I don't remember hearing anybody euphoric about it, but the markets were, with anticipation of tax cuts, healthcare reform, and deregulation. And a lot of that hasn't happened. You could say really the only thing that's happened has been massive deregulation, undoing a lot of the executive orders, which is definitely a tailwind for markets and companies. But a lot of the other things have not happened yet, and that is worrisome. His fourth worry that he pointed out was as the stock market moves higher, which it has significantly lately, so too does valuation. And there's a lot of concerns that normal valuation levels like PE and 10-year PE multiples are getting way on the high end of where they should be. And then his fifth reason is a little bit more wonky, but it says, utility shares have moved higher while financials and consumer discretionary stocks have fallen, which is typically not a big positive sign to market watchers. And number 6, he said Harvey and Irma puts the estimates of the damage that we're going to have to spend money on about $75 to $95 billion, which is a huge impact over a number of years, which could dampen GDP. And then number 7 is that the S&P 500 has gone 300 trading days without a pullback of 5% or more. That's the longest streak since July 19th, 1929. That's a big one. Way back a couple of years ago, I did a few episodes on corrections, and I liken a correction to being like a forest fire. You want to have corrections, market corrections, pretty regularly, on average, say every 18 months or so, of maybe 10% or more. And as painful as those feel and seeing the account values go down, it's sort of like a forest fire. They can be healthy. They can burn off excesses in the markets, just like in a forest. The weaker growth, which creates more fertilizer and more capital to move to more healthy companies, whether it's growth or trees. And many times, and we've seen this with some forestry policies, the longer it is in between forest fires, like a correction, the more unhealthy companies and the less efficient capital is allocated to healthy companies that are growing. Because you have these inefficient companies, just like you have, plants that aren't efficient, taking up resources that could be allocated more effectively. And a forest fire, like a market correction, helps manage that. And so this is a little worrisome to me. And then the 8th one, he gave some contraindicator that we don't need to get into because it's a little wonky. But the point is, this is a guy who runs Goldman Sachs, the premier bank investment house in the world, some say. And he is very unnerved by what's going on in the markets. And there have been others that have come out and said that. So then the question is for you and I, what do we do with this? Everybody feels this way for the most part, even as the markets are going up. Now, the contrarian would say, because everybody's worried, that's a good sign. It's when we're all euphoric that we should be worried. And since there's so much worry and it's still going up, it means we're climbing that, proverbial wall of worry that's talked about in investment circles. We know a correction is going to happen. We don't know how extensive it's going to be. But let's go back to that quote from the beginning. What can we control? We can't control the timing of the correction. I don't think we can control predicting when the correction is going to happen. So that means we're faced with what do we have in our control? And at the end of the day, what we have in our control is how we allocate our assets to work towards the life that we want. And I wanted to spend a little time setting this up because I think this is really important. That right now, when everything is euphoric as far as the markets, this is by far the best time to make sure that your financial plan and your strategy from an investment standpoint, but also a balance sheet standpoint, is fully in order. This is the time to do it when it doesn't feel that urgent because we all feel good about seeing our account statements go up every month. So what do? That's what we're going to be talking about over the coming weeks. Each week, we're going to continue to have listener questions. We got a bunch of listener questions that we want to make sure we get answered. But in the hot topic segment, each week, we're going to spend some time on one or two very specific actions that you can take to ready yourself to weather a potential correction sometime in the future to help keep your plan on track. This is what I'm doing in my internal practice and reviewing the action items that we're going to be talking about. So I think it might be a good idea for you to do that as well. So look forward to that for next week. I guess that was a setup and one big teaser. So sorry about that, but we need to get to the feedback from the results webinar that we had last week. So let's go do that.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back.
All right. Well, it's been a few weeks since we've had Nicole on the show. She sort of took a hiatus during Retirement Plan Live. So welcome back, Nicole.
Hey, Roger.
Now, I know you don't have any clue what that song is from, but everybody that's listening, if they're a baby boomer, definitely do.
I don't. I've never heard that song.
So I'm going to explain why I know she doesn't know that song, because we had Deacon Hayes on the show last week, and he's 34, and Nicole is roughly Deacon's age. I won't say her exact age. And I pointed out that when I was a senior, he was probably like in middle school or elementary school. And Nicole was very quick to point out when she was listening to the show, what?
Deacon was actually 2 when you were a senior in high school.
See what I have to put up with? Yes, Deacon was 2, and you were as well, which is crazy. But I'd take advice from you now, but definitely not when you were a 2-year-old.
That's fair. I can support that decision.
Yeah. So we had the webinar last week, and Nicole, although she wasn't on the show, or you didn't really hear her much on the webinar, she was busy in the background making everything work. So I appreciate that.
You got it.
And so today I thought what we'd do is just go through some of the comments. We won't spend too much time here, but just some of the comments and questions regarding Lori and Bruce, who were awesome in sharing. I'm always amazed when people will share so much of their story so publicly. It's pretty cool.
It's brave when you think about it. I mean, it's really putting yourself out there to be kind of judged by other people.
But I think people don't realize, like Lori and Bruce, I bet you they don't realize how much they've helped others in ways that even the listeners don't get in terms of reflecting on their choices relative to our own choices. I know I've had some of that. So a big thank you to them. So what do we have as far as comments?
Well, we've got a few comments. Our first comes from John, and he compliments that Lori and Bruce sort of are living out what we've talked about on the podcast, with Bruce picking up a side hustle after retirement, and then Lori kind of being in a state of pre-retirement right now. He wanted to know about taxes and contributing for a Roth. So they're in a low tax bracket, and he wants to know if it would be good to be transferring money into a Roth each year.
Yeah, for them, I don't know if it's going to be a huge benefit, whether it's transferring money into a Roth IRA or even doing a conversion from a pre-tax account into a Roth account. But I do think it's a good strategy for them to consider, and here's some logic behind that. One, like you point out, John, they're really in a low tax bracket, so it's not a huge cost. And at least based on the analysis done within the context of Retirement Plan Live, it looks like they're going to have a decent amount of assets that have the potential to grow beyond age 70 and a half. So anything that they don't move over to a Roth that's in an IRA is going to have required minimum distributions, which it means they're going to have to be taking money out even if they don't want to. So they might want to take advantage of making conversions from their IRAs to a Roth IRA in order to just move the tax treatment so they don't have to make those required minimum distributions. So that would definitely be something that they should address more on the tactical end of it. So that's a great thing to point out. And also, you're right. It's cool that they both are going to be doing some pre-retirement work so they can actually enjoy life a little bit more while they're still healthy.
Our next question is from Daniel, and it's kind of similar with dealing with taxes. So I figured we'd go ahead and tackle that one. He says that the needs, wants, and healthcare expenses are stated to be after tax. The actual yearly expenses do include income tax, but he wants to know if that total includes things that are covered by Social Security and outside income and investments. And so he wants to know to what extent the planning tool takes taxes into account.
So the way we had it structured, Daniel, in the analysis was all the taxes are being grinded away in every iteration in the background. So it takes into account the state that they live in and what pools of money they're taking assets from when they need to supplement whatever income sources they have. So the short answer, taxes are being taken into account within the background. By default, in the analysis that we did on the show, we assumed that they drained their after-tax money, their taxable accounts, and then went to their IRAs and then went to Roth. So that's the default sequence of drawing money out. Obviously, you can do it a lot of different ways, but it does all get calculated in the background. And I think I shared, I don't know if I said this on the webinar or on a show, I've done a lot of analysis with people that are looking to move states. And it can make a huge difference. If you're in a high income tax state and you have lots of tax deferred assets and you're going into retirement, moving, how the plan scenarios work out there can be very different than how they work out in a no income tax state, like a Texas or a Florida or a few of the others. So taxes definitely get calculated in there.
Yeah, that was something we did talk a little bit about on the webinar because somebody wanted to know if they were in a low tax state.
Yeah, you're young, so you remember this stuff really quickly. I'm a little older, so it flies out of my head.
Moving on. Our next question is from Pat. Pat is Canadian, and he says they don't have the medical expenses that we do in the US, and quote, wow, that is a big line item for you. Unquote.
It is a big line item.
It is. It definitely is. He also wants to know if their basic expenses included things like replacing the roof, having to replace a hot water heater, or some kind of major dental surgery, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the medical expense is a big deal. It all gets balanced between, you have national health care there or some version of it, and the burden of that throughout your life from a tax perspective. And now, we're grappling with how much do we want to adopt something like that. So it's definitely a big deal, especially if it's pre-Medicare, because we don't know what the system is right now. I mean, we know what's in place at this moment, but we don't know what's going to be there next year. So it's one of the most difficult things for us to figure out right now from a retirement standpoint. Yeah, a lot of comments on the spending side of it. So we didn't specifically get into, do they have reserves for the normal one-off expenses that are going to happen, like a roof replacement, a water heater, things like that. I was having this conversation the other day with a planning client of, one-off expenses are one-off, but the problem is there's always a one-off. It always feels like every month. Now, Nicole, you had a few one-offs lately.
Yeah, I have. The pool is broken again.
Yeah, pools are wonderful, right? In the summer when they work. So we didn't specifically talk about that, Pat. They did have a lot of cash reserves on the balance sheet that we did not include in the analysis. So I guess that could be part of it. But yeah, that's a good catch there.
Steve would like to know if your planning takes into account that wants are going to be fairly minimal whenever someone gets into their 80s and 90s.
Yeah, so that goes to the idea, Steve, of like the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years, right? That cycle of when you're younger and active, you're doing lots of things. And when you get older, it will slow down because, well, we slow down. I'm never slowing down, Nicole. I don't care. We didn't do that in their case. I think partly because it was already so, how much lower can you go from a spending standpoint? It was like 24,000 a year. I got them up to 26 when they put a little fluff in there. So in their case, we did not because it was so low already. But I think that's an important lever for most of us that have, I'm afraid to call it, from this audience standpoint anyway, normal spending in retirement to consider. It's a good lever that we should consider of from a life standpoint. Do we want to reasonably front load some spending so we can front load some experiences while we're still young and healthy and able. And I've done that a lot with clients, and we've transitioned from those different phases successfully, but you got to be really careful. It's very easy to mess that up if you don't transition really well, but I definitely think it's an important lever to try to pull or consider.
Our next question is from Barry, and I kind of chuckled at this one. He says, it seems that the target for a confidence score is about 75 to 85%. I heard another financial advisor say that if you were about to get on a plane and were told you had an 80% chance of landing safely, you wouldn't get on that plane. Why is this okay for your retirement?
That's a very good question, Barry. The reason that confidence level is good, or I think, in my opinion, adequate, is this: that you can get the confidence level a lot higher to 99. You can get the confidence level to 99. What levers, let's think, what levers would you have to pull to improve the confidence number above, say, 85? What do you think, Nicole?
You probably have to forego a lot of the pleasure activities like travel or
right. So let's just
kind of wishes part.
Right. Let's just travel. So let's just think of the levers that you could pull to increase that confidence level up to 99. You could work longer. That would help the confidence level go up. You could spend less in retirement because you're drawing less money. That's going to move the confidence level up in the analysis. You could save a lot more because that's going to build your assets to help. So that's going to move the confidence level up. You could take a lot more risk. That would potentially, not always, but potentially would move, you'd have higher potential returns. So that could probably help the confidence level. You could work in retirement for a lot longer because you'll have more money to supplement, so to preserve your assets. All of those levers are available to all of us to pull to help move the confidence level up. But let's talk about those levers in another way. Okay, if we work longer, that means we work longer. We have less time freedom. If we just live on less during retirement, that means that we're going to have less of a life from ability to spend money and experience things. So we're, I don't want to equate money with quality of life, but we're going to have less money available to do the things that we potentially want to do. If we save more now, and some people are really good at being really aggressive at saving more now, well, that means you probably can't go on that other vacation. You can't travel. You might have to work longer hours in order to have the extra money to save. So there's a direct personal human cost to all of these decisions. If you take more investment risk, then the direct cost of that is when we have tumultuous markets, you're going to feel them a lot more, and you're going to go through potentially a lot more emotional agony, and you're going to have a more sensitivity that it might not work. So we can get it up to a 99, but you have to be willing to make the sacrifices for that. So what I say, or my belief is that when you start getting above 90s, the likelihood is that you're going to die with more money than you wanted to die with, unless you made a goal of some kind of legacy thing. Because another way to say that 80% probability or 80% confidence number, another way to restate that is accurate is 80% of the trials you ended up with more money than you expected. So that's another way to restate that. So what I suggest is that there's an element of math sense that we have to make here, but there's also an element of human sense to make sure that we're balancing our teeter-totter between living a great life today and feeling confident about tomorrow. Because at the end of the day, Barry, here's what's going to happen is none of these numbers are going to mean a thing. That confidence number is going to change the next day and then the next day, the next day. But you can use it as a compass to help make little decisions. Yeah, if you got on an airplane and you knew you only had an 80% chance of success, you probably wouldn't get on that airplane, or you'd be thinking about it. But there is a difference here, because if you're starting to walk this journey, let's say at 80% confidence, and things start to go awry, you're changing where your destination is. If you're having little conversations, you're going to change the plan a million times to mitigate the damage. Whereas an airplane, just like an airplane would, if it was flying and it saw that it was going to go into weather that really lowered the chance of it landing safely, it would divert. And that's, I think, what you do in a human sense too.
Yeah, it's not an exact comparison, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do as a passenger on an airplane, but I think you have a little more control over your life.
Definitely.
Our last comment is from Rob, and he says, it seems to me that they thought that the expert statistics you gave them wouldn't apply to them and that they would be the exception to the rule instead of planning for the worst, and they would be lucky enough to outlive their money.
And I understand that point of view because it seems that they're really lean to the bone from a spending standpoint relative to how most of us that listen to the show live. And when you run lean to the bone, there's less flexibility to make adjustments when life goes awry. And I think that's what Rob is referring to, whether it's a long-term care event or running, you run, higher on expenses, and especially if you don't identify that you're doing it, it's hard to adjust when you're so lean. You can't pull back, right? And we talked about this. If they're running at $24,000 a year for basic living expenses and it goes to 33, 34, it blows up. And that's a different equation than saying, well, if we spend 150 or 100,000 a year, right? Because there's a lot of adjustments that can be made there. If you're running at 24, 25,000 a year and you're projecting and it's actually 35 is still not a lot of money relative to, what we see most of the time. So I think that's what Rob's getting to. And I think that goes back to, in their case, it's binary. But what I would say is the hard part with statistics and averages is nobody's average, right? There are tens of thousands of people. And we showed that, I think, in one of the hot topics during Retirement Plan Live of this is on average what people live on in retirement. So I think part of that comes from the people that probably listen to this podcast have a lot more assets, have a lot more resources than quote unquote normal people. And that makes sense from the surveys that we've done. So, but I get your point, Rob.
That's all I got.
All right. So now we are already working on the next, is it the 5th edition?
It will be, yes.
Yeah, the 5th edition of Retirement Plan Live, which will be coming out in February and March. If you have some ideas on what you would like to see in terms of, I think, we've had no pension, we've had pension, we've had very low expenses, we've had very high expenses. Maybe we should look at doing a single person. I don't know.
I think that would be interesting. A lot of people earlier this year asked us to do a Retirement Plan Live for someone that was spending less. And then I feel like we sort of got pushed back a little bit.
That's okay, though. That's okay, though. So I think, there are a lot of unique attributes to someone that is single that married couples don't have to deal with. And we've gotten emails on those too. So perhaps that is. But if you have something that you would like to see in the next Retirement Plan Live, send Nicole or I an email or go to rogerwhitney.com and you can submit an email there and we will take that under advisement. Sound good? Nicole?
Sounds good.
All right. I'll see you on the flip side in the Happy Lab. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab where we noodle just for a second on being happy. So, Nicole, when do you put up your Christmas tree? In October?
No, that's still Halloween season. Come on.
That's your favorite season, I forgot.
We usually put ours up the weekend after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's, I think, normal, right? We put up our Christmas tree at the same time. And my wife, she doesn't like the Christmas tree up too early, but we're working on her to be more festive with the decorations. So we've gotten everything up. So why is that so exciting for you?
Well, actually, when my husband and I started dating back in 2005, I started buying him an ornament every year at Christmas. And then as we've gone on vacations and things like that together, we always buy an ornament. And so it's really fun for me to unpack the tree and look at the ornaments and see, think about all the different trips that we've taken and the years over time, because I get the little personalized ornaments that have like our kids. And so there was one, where the ornament was pregnant because I was expecting a baby. And it's just really fun for me.
It's memory lane. It's memory lane. You would totally be a scrapbooker.
The kids love it. It's a good time.
You would totally be a scrapbooker.
Me?
Yeah, you totally would be.
I don't have time.
Yeah.
I have lots of bins of things that I'm going to one day scrap.
Well, I think the point of this is whether it's Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you celebrate, I think the point of it is, and I'm working on this. You're good at this. I'm working on this. It's what are the events that you should celebrate, especially when they're around family? Because it's easy for some of us to downplay them and just sort of go through it rather than embrace and enhance them, whether it's a birthday, whatever the holiday is or the event. Go ahead and go all in on it a little bit and allow yourself to celebrate, because a lot of times we don't let ourselves do that. But yeah, Nicole does.
On your marks, get set.
Hey, welcome to the Smart Sprint segment where we set a 7-day goal to take a little baby step to creating a better life and a better retirement. So here is your assignment for the next 7 days. Last week, I asked you to make a list of things you're going to stop doing. In the spirit of the season, make a list of 1 or 2 events, holidays, that you're going to make it a point to celebrate at a much higher level than you did this year. It could be an anniversary, it could be a birthday, it could be Christmas, it could be Thanksgiving, it could be Halloween. Whatever one you really think you like a little bit more, make it a point next year to celebrate it. Let's call it at a 10x level.
We currently work with clients all over the country. And if you'd like to see if you and Roger would be a good fit to work together, go to rogerwhitney.com, click on Work With Us, and I will set up time for the two of you to talk.
Awesome. So we're excited. We're so thankful we get to spend this time with you. Until next week, I am Roger Whitney, the Retirement Answer Man, and you are?
Nicole, his awesome sidekick.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.